Any advice?
Yeah, don't do it. You know, take up bicycle riding. You'll be healthier. Uh, why do I like this hobby? Uh, I think it started because it was accessible. When I was a child, very young, my father was in the army, and we go to the PX, and there were models on the shelf, and at the time they were cheap enough that I could convince my mother or my father to buy me one, and I started building them. My father says that I built my first model when I was 4 years old. I don't recall that. What I do recall is that as young as I can remember, I was building model airplanes, and I just liked the fact that it was something that I could relate to real life, but it was small and it could fit in my hands, and I could manipulate it in a way to make it my own. I have lots of other hobbies, but I I don't know that I would be able to do those other hobbies on such a consistent and regular basis. Plus, now that I'm older, uh, I really enjoy being with all the other guys who do it, and exchanging ideas, and I've got a lot of friends, and it's funny because most of my closest friends build model airplanes, or they paint figures, or they sculpt figures, and those relationships are the ones that have always been stronger. And I guess it's because they have the same infection that I do. Yeah, there's got to be something to it. There's got to be something to it. Girls like dollhouses and dolls, and some guys do too. And guys like toy soldiers when they're younger, and then they like to they like to build small cities with roads and play with Hot Wheels cars. There's something about having your world miniaturized, and having some sort of control over it, that is appealing, at least to me, and I think obviously to a lot of other people. Now, the miniature gene, that the infection, I think some of us took that, toy soldiers and Hot Wheels cars to a point that we couldn't resist it anymore. It wasn't enough for us, and so we had to start to manipulate not only the world that we put the toy soldiers in, but we had to start manipulating the toy soldiers, because they weren't exactly what we wanted. It's always been a way of relieving my mind, and sort of just being free from reality for a little while, and there's something about creating that is not only satisfying, it's a need. It's something that you kind of have to, once you've had it, you got to have more of it, and the more you create, the better it gets, and so the more the more, I don't know, endorphins you get out of it or what, but you just feel so much better about it, and there's a need to strive to get more. And I you know I don't know why other people quit, to be honest with you, because I really really enjoy it. I don't I don't say that about a lot of things, but modeling has never gotten boring to me. Well, figure painting and figure painting techniques have evolved to the point now that I think this is like the time to be alive, and I'm sure everybody thought that in their generation, because 20 years from now they're going to go, oh, it's so much better now. We have so much better tools, and we're able to create things that we weren't able to create then. But in my life, when I really started getting serious about sculpting and painting figures, I was living in Tulsa at the time, and there's a really developed society, if you will, of figure painters in Tulsa, and they hang out at a shop called the Hussar, and a guy named Mike Davidson owns the Hussar, and a great friend of mine, and we used to have club meetings at the Hussar, and we would talk about painting figures, and at the time, you weren't painting a figure unless you were painting a figure with oil paints, and there was a lot of very restrictive techniques that were used, and you had to do this and you had to do that, and I tried it. I mean, I did oil painting in the beginning, but I started looking for other sources, because the one thing I couldn't stand about oil paints was how long it took to dry, which is funny because that is why they use the oil paints. It took a long time to dry, so you had a long time to manipulate the paint. You had a long time to feather the edges of highlight to shadow. But I didn't like that. It was too long. So I started using polyester acrylics. And polyester acrylics were a very crude, very coarse pigmented paint. They were designed mostly for model railroading. And although I think for model railroading they were great, for figure painting they were probably not ideal. The color selection, at least that I had available to me, was not great. So I started mixing artist watercolors to tint the polyester. So I tend to buy a lot of the polyester colors that were the basic and lighter colors, and then tint them with the artist watercolors. So from there, I mean, we've come so far with acrylics, and I'm an acrylic painter. That's all I use. I still use some oil paint for washes on models and things like that. But for figure painting, it's all acrylics. And I went through using Tamiya acrylics. I used Tester's acrylics for a little while. I used Vallejo acrylics, or as Bob says, Vallejo acrylics. And then I was in a comic book store, and they had this new paint. It looked just like the Vallejo bottles, but it was called Reaper. And I thought, well, I'll give this a try because they had a couple of colors I needed, and they were out of the Vallejo colors, and so I bought the Reaper paints. And the thing that I always liked about the Vallejo colors was the variety, but they had some properties that weren't fun for me. The pigments were coarser than I liked, and they did, even for an acrylic, they dried a little too fast. So I tried the Reaper. Very fine pigment. For some reason, it stays wetter longer. It's almost like more of an artist's choice for an acrylic paint. And then I discovered that Reaper is that their factory is like 30 minutes from my house, and that's the rest of the story. Love this stuff. It's funny. I've been going to Chicago for. I started working at American Airlines in 1988, and 6 months after I started, I got my flight benefits, and so I started flying to Chicago every October for the Chicago show. Mostly because my hero was from Chicago, and that's Shep Payne, and I wanted to see him, and I kind of wanted to be there and be a fly on the wall, and I brought my work, and I liked Civil War. I've always liked Civil War because of the color. Plus, it almost anything goes with Confederate gray and butternut and all that sort of thing. So I did a lot of Emery Risley figures that were Civil War figures, and it's just single figures. And I went to Chicago for many years, and then this one year, for some reason, some guy came up to me and asked me, and I had a big display, and he asked me if I would sell one of my figures, and this was a little foreign to me. Nobody had ever asked that before, and I thought, well, yeah, that'd be a good idea, and that way I can help pay for the hotel and all this sort of thing. And so he asked me how much I'd sell the figure for, and it was a figure of General Hooker in 54 millimeter, and I said, yeah, I don't know, $75, and he goes, oh, okay, and he bought it. And the next thing I know, another guy came up to me, hey, I hear you're selling figures, and he bought another one. I don't remember how many figures I had, but it was like 12 or 14 figures. I sold them all in about an hour and a half, and the last guy that bought a figure was Bill Horan. He came up to me, and he said, you're selling figures? I said, yes, sir. And I knew who he was.
Yeah.
He didn't know who I was. And Bill said, well, how much for and he bought a figure of I think he bought the Burnside, because I had all these generals. I had Meade and Burnside and Hooker, and I think I had a Lee. I even had a Lincoln. Anyway, he bought the figure. He asked me how much, and I said, $75, and he got the money out and he paid for it, and he kind of took me aside. He said, what's your name? And I said, Doug. He goes, you need to increase your prices. And I said, well, okay, then why don't you give me $250? Anyway, he he said, no, I'm only giving you $75. But The uh, the point of it was, he said I was selling myself too cheap, and then that's kind of where the commission started. I discovered that people were actually willing to pay for figures, and and they were willing to pay for the quality, but obviously, I had something they wanted. I mean, I have a style, a technique, I guess, and they liked it, and from there, I didn't do a lot of sculpting back then, but because the commission started rolling in and because people wanted certain things, I started to convert and sculpt figures. And back in the day, I would, because I had three kids at home, and life was kind of expensive, and we were trying to make ends meet. I did a lot of things that I probably didn't want to do, and you ask yourself, well, how do you keep it interesting when it's something you don't want to do? I really like painting figures, and generally speaking, they didn't ask me to do anything that was horrible. It's just maybe it wasn't something I was really super excited about. But what I found was, if I would just apply myself and just put myself into it, I almost always became interested. And I would grab a book and read a little bit about whatever this particular guy did, or this regiment was doing, and it did make it interesting to me. I I've always liked helicopters. It was I'm an aircraft mechanic. It was my MOS in the Army, aircraft maintenance. I don't. I work on airliners all day long. That's what I do. In fact, now I'm in a structure shop, a sheet metal shop, and which most of the other mechanics call that arts and crafts, which is funny, but it really kind of is. You got to make it look good. You have to you got to make metal work look pretty, because if it doesn't, bad things happen. Anyway, I like I like helicopters because they are they are defying so many of the unwritten laws of aviation, and they do it on a daily basis. And they can do things that no other aircraft can do, and they can do them in a way that is just fascinating. To have something come and land in the within the diameter of its rotor, you got to have some space, but you don't need much, and take off in that same space, and be able to bring stuff in or haul stuff out, and it's all done heavier than air, and it's amazing. And I just I don't know. There's something about the uniqueness of the way helicopters look, the sound they make. I even read the Bible, and in Revelations, when they talk about the multi-headed dragons that were making all the sounds of the chariots. I'm thinking they're talking about a helicopter, and they're talking dragons spitting fire. Well, yeah, I've seen those helicopters too. I love to see good models. I love to go up to people and say, man, that is an awesome model. There is nothing better to me than to go to a contest with my best helicopter, put it on the table, and have somebody else bring a better helicopter and set it next to it, and get to talk to that guy about how he made his so much better. And winning is great, but I honestly, I would rather be beat by something really, really better than mine and learn from it than take home another medal. You're asking me if there's any advice I can give, I guess, to future modelers.
Yeah.
When I was a child, and I was born in '63, so I always consider my childhood to be the '70s, the early '70s. Everybody, every single one of my friends built models. Now, granted, my father was in the Army at the time. We were on a base, and all of my friends were in similar situations. But every one of my friends built models. We all went to the PX. We all got models, and I remember having 5, 6 of my friends sitting in the living room of my house, laying on the ground, with our models in front of us, just having a blast. And it was pure joy. So my advice would be, don't do something that you don't want to do, and whatever it is you're doing, enjoy it. Don't worry about what other people think. Don't, You know, if you're not a prototypical modeler, if you're not the guy that has to have every rivet in the right place, and some of us are, and that's great. If that's what you do and that's what you enjoy, then do it. But if you're the kind of guy that wants to paint a figure, and even if it's a military figure, and just make it pure fantasy because that's what you enjoy, then that's what you should do also. Somebody once asked, in as far as judging at a show is concerned, well, you guys you judge accuracy, and we can't judge accuracy because it's art. How do you judge accuracy when it's art? And you know, I'm not saying that some people don't try to judge accuracy, but I don't personally know everything, so how could I possibly? I would much rather just judge the technique and whether or not my eye is fooled into thinking that the miniature that you've put onto the table is going to be able to crawl off that base and you know, hack the guy next to him with his sword. And that's what I love.
Is there anything you want to say? Anything you gotta get off your chest? You just
Yeah, I've been wanting to say this for a long. Are you going to put this in here?
Yeah.
Okay. Bob Bethea does not know everything. That's all I want to say. I think that needs to get out to the world. I love the man, but he doesn't know everything.
He made me dribble.
Okay.
Interview over.
Roll, show, roll, show, all of